I think I have to mold him, like I do with everybody. This is what I have to do. You know, I respect him like fighter, like human, like and. But when we go to the cage, I have to mold this guy.
With UFC 242 right around the corner, UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov will be looking to make his second title defense, as he faces off against interim lightweight champion Dustin Poirier. So far, Khabib has run through virtually every one of his opponents with relative ease, leaving many of us wondering if Dustin Poirier will be able to give him a challenge. So for this video, we'll be taking a look back at some of Khabib's best and most dominant performances. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, here's a list of Khabib Nurmagomedov's top 5 fights. Number 5. Khabib vs Iaquinta. Let's just say that the week leading up to UFC 223 was one of the wildest and most frustrating weeks in UFC history. After several unsuccessful attempts in the past, Khabib Nurmagomedov was finally set to face Tony Ferguson for the undisputed lightweight title in April of 2018. But after Ferguson was forced out of the fight due to injuring his knee, the UFC scrambled to find a replacement opponent. It was the 4th time the fight had fallen through, leaving many MMA fans devastated. Eventually, they went with the featherweight champion Max Holloway to replace Tony Ferguson at UFC 223. Unfortunately, Max was declared unfit to fight during the day of the weigh-in, which left the UFC once again racing to find a replacement opponent. In the end, they went with Iaquinta, who was already scheduled to fight on the same card as Khabib. And as if all the last-minute changes to the card wasn't enough to cause a headache, McGregor throwing a dolly through a bus definitely added to the chaos. Despite numerous distractions, Khabib made it to the octagon and put on a masterful performance. For the first 2 rounds, Khabib dominated the fight. From the opening minutes, he landed his signature takedowns and kept the pressure on. Even when the takedowns weren't working, he outstruck his opponent with solid jabs and hard combinations, relying on his grappling in the early rounds while testing his striking in the later rounds. Khabib seemed to have the beating of Al in all areas of the fight, but to Al's credit, he showed a lot of heart considering he only trained for 3 rounds and was going up against one of the best grapplers in the world. But when it was all said and done, Khabib walked away with the victory, easily winning all 5 rounds on the judges' scorecards. The win marked a new era for the lightweight division. Number 4. Khabib vs Rafael dos Anjos. When a potential showdown between Khabib and Gilbert Melendez fell through in 2014 due to a contract dispute, Khabib was instead set to face off against future lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos. The two were paired off in the main event of a preliminary card in April of 2014. At the time, Dos Anjos was easily the toughest caliber of fighter Khabib had faced thus far in his career. So, in the eyes of the fans, this fight would be a big test for him. With big wins over names like Evan Dunham and Donald Cerrone, Dos Anjos was someone who was quickly becoming a formidable lightweight contender. On paper, the fight seemed like a competitive matchup, but in reality, it wasn't even close. Once the fight began, it wasn't long before fans quickly realised that there was a massive skill gap between them. For the full 15 minutes, Khabib put a beating on Dos Anjos, swarming him with punches and taking him down at will. And as expected, once he got the fight to the ground, he beat him up from the top position. Every time Dos Anjos got back up, Khabib dragged him down to the ground once again. While Dos Anjos attempted a couple of submissions from the bottom position, Khabib easily slipped out and continued to control the fight. As hard as he tried, Khabib was simply too much to handle for RDA. The onslaught continued for the entire duration of the fight, meaning it was another one-sided beatdown for the Russian native, who moved one step closer to earning a shot at the title. But what was remarkable about the win was not only Khabib's performance, but the fact that Dos Anjos actually went on to seize the lightweight title, which just goes to show how good Khabib is. Number 3. Khabib vs Conor McGregor. Normally, when you take an elite striker versus an elite wrestler, the wrestler will win the majority of the time. And this was no different when Khabib Nurmagomedov faced off against Conor McGregor. During the build-up, McGregor definitely talked the talk, but it was Khabib who walked the walk. Although oddsmakers had it as a close fight on paper, the actual match was a different story. As McGregor pressured Khabib at the start of the fight, Khabib landed a takedown almost immediately, dragging Conor to the ground as he secured the top position. Although the first round was a bit slow, things really started to turn up in the second. To the surprise of many fans, Khabib actually managed to drop Conor McGregor with a lightning fast strike that sent him retreating. And while it didn't put him away, it certainly forced McGregor to respect the stand-up game of Khabib. From there, Khabib continued to do more of the same, landing takedowns on McGregor as he followed up with heavy shots from the top position. And as Khabib landed massive blows, all McGregor could do was cover up and try to survive. Khabib continued to unload punishment onto McGregor, right up until the end of the second round. Heading into the championship rounds, Khabib was easily ahead on the judges' scorecards, as he once again scored a takedown on McGregor in the fourth round and worked to secure his back. From there, Khabib sank in a neck crank on McGregor, which forced him to tap out just a few moments later. Despite the controversial move of Khabib hopping over the cage and inciting a brawl, the victory over Conor McGregor was a massive win. And what's also incredibly impressive is the fact that Khabib never seemed to be in any real danger. In the end, Khabib did what many expected him to do and walked away as the undisputed lightweight champion. Number 2. Khabib versus Michael Johnson. Following Khabib's incredibly dominant performance against Rafael dos Anjos, it seemed he was well on his way to earning a shot at the UFC's lightweight title. Unfortunately, due to a string of injuries, Khabib was forced to sit on the sidelines for 2 whole years. Once he returned in 2016, he had originally signed an agreement to fight Eddie Alvarez at UFC 205 for the lightweight belt. But in a controversial move, the UFC decided to have Khabib instead fight Michael Johnson at UFC 205, with Conor McGregor being given the shot against Eddie Alvarez. With Michael Johnson coming off of a big win against Dustin Poirier, he entered the fight with Khabib as confident as ever. And once the fight began, Michael Johnson began to find success on his feet. Khabib looked to be a bit rusty after a 2-year layoff, and Michael Johnson capitalised, catching him numerous times with quick jabs. But once Khabib got back to his bread and butter and initiated his wrestling, it was all downhill for Johnson. The moment Khabib took Johnson down, the fight turned from a competitive match into a one-sided beating. No matter how hard he tried, Johnson was simply unable to escape Khabib's top position. And while he expended energy trying to get free, Khabib unloaded brutal strikes onto Johnson. The second round looked to be more of the same, as Khabib took down Johnson almost immediately, continuing to rain down punches and elbows. And by the third round, Khabib began telling Johnson to give up as he pummeled into him with strikes. Finally, a few minutes into the third round, Khabib ended Johnson's misery and sunk in a submission to finish the fight. His win over Johnson sent a loud message to the rest of the division, a message that read that not only was he back, but that he was coming for that title. Number 1. Khabib versus Edson Barboza. In March of 2017, Khabib was originally set to face off against Tony Ferguson for the interim lightweight title at UFC 209, as Conor McGregor was off preparing for a fight against Floyd Mayweather. But when Khabib was forced out of the fight after a rough weight cut, he saw himself sidelined until December of 2017. Once he returned, he was paired off in a non-title fight against the deadly striker Edson Barboza. Considering Khabib was coming off of a terrible weight cut, this fight was an important one, and one that would answer a lot of questions from fans. On the other hand, Barboza had quietly secured 3 straight victories and was looking to put himself in position to fight for a title. So, with a potential title shot on the line for both men, the stakes were understandably high. Once the fight began, Barboza was able to fire off a few successful leg kicks. Unfortunately for Barboza, they proved to be completely ineffective. Khabib seemed to walk through any strike that Barboza let off, charging at him as he dragged him to the ground. From there, Khabib completely demolished Barboza. The second and third rounds were no different. Minute by minute, Khabib kept the pressure on, giving Barboza no room to breathe. Again and again, Khabib continuously took Barboza down, suffocating him with strikes as he continued to rain down heavy shots. In the end, Barboza looked completely overwhelmed, and once the fight had concluded, the judges gave Khabib the decision in one of the UFC's most lopsided victories. In fact, it was scary to see such an elite fighter get dominated at will, and if there were any doubts before this fight about how good Khabib is, well, they were immediately put to rest. So there you have it. That concludes our list of 5 of the best Khabib Nurmagomedov fights. Remember guys, this is in no particular order, it's just 5 of the best. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you on the next video.